What if the 45th President of the United States, a man synonymous with golden towers and reality TV, wasn't a real estate mogul from Queens, but a king in the European Dark Ages? It's a scenario that sounds completely absurd, and let's be clear, it is. But it also makes you wonder, how would a 21st century personality built on ambition, showmanship, and a very personal style of leadership handle a world of mud, Vikings, and feudalism? So let's play out a satirical, but kinda sorta historically grounded scenario where, through some truly bizarre events, Donald J. Trump is crowned king and sets out to make the Dark Ages great again. First, let's set the stage. The Dark Ages, which covers roughly the 5th to the 10th centuries, gets a bad rap. It wasn't all just misery and no learning. But let's be honest, it wasn't a picnic either. The Western Roman Empire had crumbled, leaving a fractured Europe in its wake. Central authority was a distant memory, replaced by a patchwork of petty kingdoms and warring tribes. Viking longships were a constant terror, appearing like a terrible surprise party you never asked for that always ended with your monastery on fire. Society was basically a complex web of obligations between lords, vassals, and peasants we now call feudalism. For most people, life was local, short, and your chances of social climbing were about the same as a turnip. Into this chaotic, decentralized, and frankly low-energy world, our story begins. We won't get bogged down in the how. Let's just say it involved a malfunctioning time portal, a prophecy from a hermit who'd eaten some very funny mushrooms, and a truly tremendous speech to a confused mob of Anglo-Saxon farmers who just thought he was a very confident man with weirdly colored hair. And so it happened. Donald, son of Fred, was crowned king of the Middle Angles, a moderately important but frequently troubled kingdom. His first decree, yelled from the balcony of his hastily acquired wooden keep, was simple. This kingdom is a disaster, a total disaster, but we're going to fix it. We're going to win so much, you're going to get tired of winning. The assembled serfs, who were mostly just hoping for a slightly lower chance of dying from dysentery, cheered weakly. The first thing on King Donald's agenda wasn't legal reform or farming, it was branding. He looked at the dreary, functional stone and wood castles of his neighbors and was not impressed. Look at their castles. They're sad, low energy, not a winner in the bunch, he proclaimed to his new royal council. We're going to build the best castles, tremendous castles. And so began the Great British Rebuilding, his flagship project, Trump Castle-upon-Avon. It was, in a word, huge. While other kings built for defense, King Donald built for spectacle. The walls were high, sure, but more importantly, they were covered in a thin, easily pillaged layer of gold leaf. The towers were tall not for archers, but so he could have Trump carved into them in 20-foot-high letters. This was less a fortress and more a neo-feudal monument to himself. His real estate background was on full display. He wasn't just building a castle, he was selling a vision. The moat wasn't a stagnant death trap, it was a beautiful water feature, complete with imported swans and a small island for golf practice. His building obsession extended to national security. The Vikings, or as he called them, the Norway people, were a huge problem. His solution was bold, the Great Wall of Mercia. It's a tremendous wall, he denounced via town crier. It's going to be so high, no Viking can climb it, and we're going to make the Vikings pay for it. The logistics of how, exactly, a decentralized group of sea raiders would pay for a 1,000-mile wall were a little fuzzy. The royal exchequer, a man named Ethelred, who was very good at counting sheep, had a nervous breakdown trying to draft the invoice. The Vikings, for their part, were just confused. They simply sailed their longships a little further down the coast and continued pillaging, occasionally shouting insults at the half-finished wall as they passed. King Donald's infrastructure plans were just as ambitious and chaotic. He promised Infrastructure Week every week, vowing to pave the muddy tracks that passed for roads. We're going to have the best roads, so smooth, the ox carts will glide. It'll be beautiful. But construction would inevitably stall as he got into feuds with local barons over who had the best dirt, accusing the Lord of Sussex of sending him bad, weak dirt, not winning dirt. His leadership style, all about personal loyalty, clashed hard with the feudal structure. Every baron was a king in his own lands, and they weren't about to take orders on road construction from a loud man in an oversized crown. King Donald's approach to foreign policy was unconventional. Medieval diplomacy was a formal dance of treaties, marriage alliances, and fancy envoys. King Donald preferred to operate on gut feelings and personal chemistry. His leadership was impulsive and disruptive, trampling all over the era's traditions. The most pressing issue, besides the wall-dodging Vikings, was the dragon. A nasty one had moved in up north, incinerating villages and hoarding treasure. His advisors urged a military response. "We must send our best knights," they begged. King Donald scoffed. "Wrong! Totally wrong. You have to know how to talk to these people." First, he declared the dragon attacks fake news spread by rival kingdoms. When a charred village provided undeniable proof, he shifted gears, announcing that he alone could solve it. "I have a great relationship with the dragons," he'd say, despite never having met one. Smaug, the great guy, very powerful, very smart. "We have an understanding." It was a kind of amoral, deal-based politics that would have made Machiavelli blush a few centuries early. He arranged a summit. He rode out to the edge of the dragon's scorched land with only a herald and a cart of gold. Not tribute, he insisted, but a deal sweetener. The negotiations, which were mostly him shouting compliments at a cave, were declared a historic success. The Great Dragon Accord was proclaimed in every village. The terms were simple. The dragon gets a bi-weekly delivery of 100 sheep and in return agrees not to burn down the specific village where King Donald kept his summer castle. Every other village was, to use the diplomatic term, on its own. His policy towards the Vikings was just as erratic. One week he was railing against them, the next he was admiring their strength. Tough people, the Vikings, very strong. Winners, he'd muse. He invited a fearsome jarl named Olaf the Boneless to court and showered him with praise. A great leader, Olaf. Terrific meeting. The next day, he'd try to slap a massive tariff on all pillaged goods, causing a diplomatic incident that ended with Olaf threatening to burn the new water feature. His relationships with other kings were all about personal flattery. If the King of Wessex praised his castle towers, he was a fantastic ally, a real friend. If the King of Northumbria questioned his crown, he was a nasty, failing king of a sad little kingdom. Alliances shifted daily, creating a state of perpetual chaos that kept the court scribes busy rewriting treaties that were obsolete before the ink was dry. Now, all this talk of chaotic kingdoms and bad deals might have you thinking about protecting your own digital life. Unlike King Donald's promises, there's actually a great deal that delivers. Let me tell you about today's sponsor name. They provide a simple, secure way to organize your passwords and digital file, so you don't have to worry about your own kingdom being invaded by digital Vikings. It's incredibly easy to use, and unlike a treaty with King Donald, it's reliable. Click the link in the description below to get a great deal, a tremendous deal on your subscription. It's the best, everyone agrees. The feudal economy was simple. Serfs worked the land they were born on, and in exchange for a lifetime of back-breaking labor, their lord protected them and let them not starve. It was a system of mutual obligation, though one side was definitely getting the better deal. King Donald saw this ancient system and saw only one thing: bad management. The lords are getting taken to the cleaners, he'd declare. And the serfs? They're living like kings. Believe me, it's a terrible, terrible deal. We're going to renegotiate. His big idea was the art of the medieval deal. He held massive rallies in the castle courtyard, bypassing the nobles and speaking directly to the serfs. Standing on a hastily built stage, he'd address the bewildered, lice-ridden crowd. "They say you're a serf. They look down on you, but you're not serfs. You're temporarily embarrassed noblemen. That's what you are. And we're going to bring back farming. We're going to have the best harvests. So much harvesting, you're going to get tired of harvesting." The serfs, who were already quite tired of harvesting, would cheer anyway. It was a nice break from the mud. He promised to free them from the shackles of the barons, who he painted as a corrupt, deep fiefdom. His populist charisma struck a chord with a peasantry that felt ignored by the powerful. To stimulate the economy, he introduced Trump pence, a new currency minted with his own face on it. He claimed it was backed by the full faith and credit of the king's winningness, and was worth far more than boring old silver coins. It was not. The resulting hyperinflation meant a loaf of bread cost a wheelbarrow full of Trump pence by tea time. His signature initiative was a new competition, the serf's apprentice. Peasants from across the kingdom would compete in grueling agricultural challenges. Who can muck a stable the fastest? Who can plow the straightest furrow? The winner would be awarded a slightly larger hut and their own pig. The losers would be brought before the king, who, sitting on a golden throne, would point a finger and declare, "You're fired," which in this case meant being banished to the fields near the dragon's territory. It was all classic Trump. Create a spectacle, personalize the economy, and focus on individual winners and losers instead of fixing the actual system. For a while, the sheer force of King Donald's personality kept the kingdom lurching along, but the gold leaf was starting to peel. The Great Wall of Mercia was still a half-finished, expensive folly. The dragon, bored with the sheep delivery service, ate the royal treasurer during a contract renegotiation, which plunged the kingdom into a financial crisis, as the treasury was now mostly dragon food. The serfs, fired up by the king's talk of being temporarily embarrassed noblemen, but not seeing their lives improve, started to organize. Inspired by the king's own disregard for the rules, they formed the United Serfs and Ploughmen's Guild, Local Number 1. They drew up a list of demands: warmer huts, fewer floggings, and maybe a day off every other decade. The neighboring kings, fed up with the diplomatic whiplash and daily insults, formed a coalition of the same and started massing armies at the border. King Donald's court fell into chaos. He saw enemies everywhere. "The scribes are fake news," he'd bellow. "The royal jester, a traitor, very disloyal. The archbishop has always been against me. Everyone knows it." He became a tragicomic figure, a medieval King Lear with more bravado. He'd stand on the battlements of his golden castle, delivering rambling monologues to the imported swans in the moat, complaining about how unfairly he was being treated, oblivious to his kingdom collapsing under the weight of his own chaotic and self-serving decisions. So what would the Dark Ages really look like under King Donald? The castles would be gaudier, the diplomacy would be more unpredictable than a joust on ice, and the economy would be based less on grain and more on vibes. His reign would be a whirlwind of bold pronouncements, half-finished projects, and bitter personal feuds. He wouldn't have illuminated the Dark Ages. He'd have just slapped a coat of gold paint on them and declared the darkness defeated. His autocratic, charismatic style was a perfect fit for the personal nature of medieval rule, but his modern, media-driven tactics would have crashed headfirst into the rigid, honor-bound world of feudalism. And maybe that's what this whole thought experiment shows us. The crown changes, but the fundamental challenges of leadership, balancing ego with duty, spectacle with substance, and deals with diplomacy, are timeless. King Donald's reign would have been a loud, spectacular, and ultimately failed state. But perhaps he wouldn't have been overthrown. In the most fitting end, he likely would have just gotten bored. One day, with enemy armies at the gates and the serfs on strike, he would simply declare total victory, insist everyone agreed he was the best king in history, and abdicate to go build a beautiful new golf course in what used to be the Kingdom of Wessex. But what do you think? How long would King Donald's medieval reign have truly lasted? Let me know your scenarios in the comments below. If you enjoyed this trip through a very alternate timeline, be sure to smite that subscribe button and ring the bell of notifications so you don't miss our next video. And for more historical absurdity, check out this video right here on What If Genghis Khan Had Access to Twitter. Thanks for watching.